Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Gray Minds Think Alike. I am your host, Ali Kessler, and today I'm speaking with David Mandel, author, speaker, and the founder and CEO of the Safe and Together Institute, a program developed to help create child-centered systems, keeping children safe and together with their protective parents. With over 35 years in child welfare and domestic violence reform, David helps teach the Safe and Together model across the globe and is the author of the best-selling book, Stop Blaming Mothers and Ignoring Fathers, How to Transform the Way We Keep Children Safe from Domestic Violence. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for talking with us today. I love to get a male perspective of everything. So if you want to just start off by just introducing yourself, a little bit about your background.
Sure, Ali, and thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate the work you're doing as well. It's great to be joining you and your audience. I can tell you I got started this years ago. For me, I became very interested in what I could do as a man to address this issue of male violence against women and eventually come to understand against children and other people. And I got very motivated to do something. And I heard one day, this is going back to my university days, I heard one day of a group of men marching against male violence against women. This was out in St. Louis back in the day. And something clicked in place for me. And I can't, even to this day, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I can't tell you what that was or exactly what happened, but something was unlocked in me, literally, a passion, a commitment that has carried me through almost 40 years. And I started my professional career doing work with men who'd been arrested for violence against their partners. And then from there, I started training other professionals because I realized that the experience I was gathering through working directly with men, which was rare at that point, was valuable to other people in substance programs, to judges, probation. And then I got invited, a real moment in some ways where I got to where I am today was in Connecticut, where I've been based for years. There was a murder of a toddler by this woman's boyfriend and the mother of the child. And unfortunately, these stories are very common, as you know. And it forced that child protection agency to look at their practice around domestic violence. And so I got pulled into doing work around perpetrators and training social workers. And that's the beginning of everything that I've done since then, which is really looking to transform systems, first child protection, but then across all systems that touch families, to hold perpetrators accountable as parents, to get those systems to partner better with protective parents, and ultimately to keep those kids safer.
Right. And what kind of background in school do you have? What did you major in to do this type of work? I'm just curious.
Well, it's really interesting. My undergraduate was in government, political science.
That does go hand in hand.
Well, it does, but also it was an education in power and power dynamics. And that's both about understanding social dynamics, but also really a lot about coercive control and power and vulnerability and targeting people and turning them into all those things are obviously deeply applicable when you look at coercive control and domestic violence at the family level, not only the social level. So I did that. And then I started doing work with perpetrators. And then I went back to school for my master's in counseling and psychology and did, a study for my master's thesis study around perpetrators in programs across the U.S. and Canada, 1,000, looking at their attitudes and beliefs around their behavior towards their kids and their partner as a parent. Right. And so again, that came later in my career. I was already established. I was already working. I was already speaking publicly, but it really added something nice for me to really understand certain things. And since then, it's really about doing the work.
So how did the Safe and Together Institute come about? I mean, aside from that, how did it sort of develop and form into what it is today?
I mean, it includes all those experiences. It includes really listening deeply to women, particularly and survivors in general, and really paying attention to their stories. And, that's how I got into the work in the beginning, was that I became interested because I was hearing women talk about feeling unsafe from men in their lives. And so I really developed the model out of deep listening to the voices of women in general and survivors, and then really had these set of experiences working with perpetrators, looking at systems, and then getting involved with child protection. And what I'll tell you there is that what I learned very quickly is that child protection systems and then these other systems really didn't work with men, didn't really engage men, didn't really. And so a case could come in because of a dad's violence to his partner in front of his kids, let's say, and the case would get opened by child protection for a referral from the police. And then all the casework would be done with the mother. And even though somebody was legally a parent, had parental responsibility, and their behavior was the reason why the case got opened, all the social work would be done with the mother. And so that began my education at another level, where I was looking at systems and seeing that, and I can jump ahead to the title of my book, Stop Blaming Mothers, Ignoring Fathers. So I saw tremendous amount of mother blaming and father ignoring. And that really set me on the road of creating the Safe and Together model before the Institute started, developing the model. And then the Institute became a vehicle for really delivering it globally.
Now, how does the model work? How is it used? Who uses it?
Those are all great questions. The model one is just to say it's being used all over the world. It's being trained actually everywhere in the world.
People get trained in it and then have it for patients, or?
Yeah, well, they get trained in it and they become certified to train in it. We have 400 certified trainers across from Singapore to Australia to New Zealand, the United Kingdom and Canada, and across the United States. And it's growing every day. We have interest in Japan. I just got invited to speak in Japan. My book's getting translated into Japanese. I'm going to be going to the Netherlands in November. The book's being translated and should come out in Dutch soon. So if you have any listeners who speak Japanese or Dutch, they can read the books in that language. But the model is a way of approaching and thinking and analyzing cases, but it's also a way about, it gives you guidance to how to talk to survivors, how to literally partner with them. So it's a whole of family. What's different is it's just not from the point of view of a survivor or a perpetrator, but it's a point of view incorporating those perspectives, listening to survivors particularly, but teaching professionals how they should do their job better in a domestic violence informed way. And so it's different than a service delivery model. This is what I think is often challenging for people. They think, is it a domestic violence service? Well, we don't work directly with families. We teach social workers. And it's not just child protection social workers anymore. It's addiction workers, mental health workers. It's family court personnel like judges and lawyers.
Yep.
One of our guardians ad litem. We are, for instance, I'll give you an example. In Australia, where we've had, in some ways, our deepest penetration, like 40% of our work is in Australia. We work with state government child protection agencies all over the country. We work with the universities, work Ministry of Health that oversees addiction services, work with national organizations. We work with domestic violence services. We work with all these different things. And we work with the federal family court that does divorce, custody, parenting time. And so there, for instance, we've been training for 4 years judges, the judicial officers who have delegated authority to do interim orders without findings, but the social scientists, as they refer to them, the court report writers, who have so much influence. And most recently, we developed training for what they call their independent children's lawyers, which are attorneys for children, or like in the US, like guardians ad litem or children's attorneys in other places. And they're all getting trained to speak the same language. They're all getting trained to talk about, how do you hold perpetrators accountable as parents? How do you see survivors' protective efforts? How do you avoid the bias of gender expectations of low standards for men as parents and very higher standards for women as parents? And so we train all of that, and the model is designed to help them do their job better, more efficiently, and ultimately more safely, more equitably, with better attention to good outcomes for adult and child survivors.
Now, I'm curious, have you gotten any pushback from like fathers' rights movements or, men in general?
To be honest, we get a little bit here and there, but not a lot. And what I'll say is, one of the reasons, there may be other ones too, one of the reasons is we are, and this is what's embedded in the title of the book, right? The book is Stop Blaming Mothers and Ignoring Fathers, How to Transform the Way We Keep Children Safe from Domestic Violence. And what I learned early on was that and what was important to me and felt important to the work was that we had to have a whole of family. A lot of times the response has been knee jerk, and it came out of good reasons. We'll just separate the couple. And
Right.
then the kids are going, and we know better, right? You know better, unfortunately. And then we know better, right? Across the board, that the answer to a lot of sisters was, well, the woman should leave. And that's the answer. And that doesn't work for so many different reasons to make that the prescribed answer. Because if the relationship continues or the woman can't leave, she often gets blamed. All these things, right? But the other thing is that a lot of survivors would tell you, well, I want my kids to have safe contact with their father, safe contact with their father.
Right.
I don't want to be with them, but I understand. Like, I would say the majority of survivors I've spoken to will say, well, I don't want to be with them anymore, but I understand my kids, that this person's their father. And they just want support for navigating that safely. And what I found is people had a really black and white sort of, well, kick the guy out, he's a bad guy. And that's not aligned with either what the survivor wants in most cases or the children want in many cases. And so I wanted to give systems a language to focus on safety and this reality of what survivors want. And that was really what was driving me. And so what I found is that a lot of times people were saying fathers matter. And what that means is we're not going to talk about the quality of the parenting. We're not going to talk about what they do right or wrong. We're not going to engage them on their behavior. We're just going to promote fathers matter. And that's a lot of what sort of is fathers' rights groups, as you call them, have taken a position on.
Right.
Even if they've done harm, let's strengthen that relationship. Let's make sure that's. And
because
what I also,
there's been such a stigma on fathers not wanting to be involved in their children's life that they had to make this to sort of say, we're here, but
right.
That doesn't mean they're
Well, and what I'll say on the other side is in the U.S. particularly, and this is less true or different in other countries, we had, because of going back to slavery, going back to Jim Crow, going back to even the modern welfare state, there was a lot of social forces pushing poor men of color out of families. Like, you couldn't at one point get welfare if there was a man in the house, right? All these things. And so there were forces breaking up poor, Black, Indigenous, brown families, and that often forced men into the shadows or denied them economic opportunities. And so there's been a movement in the U.S. also to say we need to fix and heal that damage, right? So you'd have child protection agencies saying, well, where's the dad? Where's the dad? Where's the dad? Without regard to whether he'd been violent and they were separated because he was violent and he wasn't in the picture. There were other reasons, So what I found is you had those folks saying, dads are great, let's get them involved. The fathers right to the other side were saying, I have a right to my kid, doesn't matter what I did. And what I said is, there's something else we can say. And so this is why I don't think we get pushback as much, because we say fathers' choices and behaviors matter to children and their partner and their functioning of the family, right? So it's not fathers are great or let's get rid of dads. It's like, let's just talk about dads as parents who can be good parents. And that's right, can be good parents or bad parents.
Right.
But let's have a standard of looking at their behaviors and saying, how are they strengthening or weakening the function of the family? It's really not rocket science.
It's just hard to get that, especially when the father is saying, no, this is parental alienation. You're keeping me out of my child's life, because that's what happened in my case.
Right. Well, this is, and so there's a chapter in the book on, as you know, on the myth of parental alienation, which says that, so I tackle that directly on, and it's very tied to the gender expectation. So one of my things that I feel like I learned on the ground, so this wasn't coming in this way, this was really watching that the systems and the professionals. So this is, I'm not going to say that every mom's a better mom than a dad.
Sure.
There are great moms, there are poor moms, there are great dads, there are poor dads. Like, that's the world. But what I found is the professionals and the systems had a built-in bias that needs to be called out, which is, if I walked into a house as a social worker, and goes through a lot of systems, I'm going to ask the mother if the kids are medically up to date.
Right.
And if the kids are not medically up to date, I'm going to expect you to fix it, or I'm going to hold you accountable for that. I'm not asking questions about, did he deny you access to the car? Did he take your phone? Did he tell you not to take the kids to the doctor after he injured them? I'm just going to assume as the mother that you were supposed to do that. And that's the kind of stuff. And on the flip side, I'm not going to ask the dad about his role, because I would see cases where the mother had addiction issues and the dad was doing all the parenting. Even in those cases, the dad's behaviors were often invisible, or they were held up on this amazing pedestal of
Right.
like, isn't he a great dad? No, he's just doing what a parent's supposed to do. Like, I don't want to
Right.
minimize it, but like,
My judge in my case, when we first went to our first hearing for paternity, the lawyer told the judge, my client moved down here to rescue his son.
right,
Like he's the hero in all
right,
of this. He
right.
also murdered his son.
And I've been involved in, in those cases, and I think these things are very implicated. You said about parental alienation being thrown at you,
Right.
alleged in the court case. Part of, like, there's debates about, and this, that there's debates about whether parental alienation, it's not a diagnosis, but people still
Right.
use the term, but it's morphed into things like in Australia, resistance and refusal. It's, estrangement. It gets used in these
Sure.
different ways. But if you kind of lean into it and say, okay, is there a dynamic that could exist in some situations where one parent actively turns a kid against the other parent, right? You just
Right.
accept that for the moment. And you look at the definitions anybody's using around that thing. What they're going to tell you is there has to have been a good prior relationship between that alleged alienated parent and the kids. So you have to be able to look at the
The before and
quality of,
after.
yeah, the quality of the relationship. That's one thing. You have to also, excuse me, say, is this child's desire not to have contact unreasonable or unjustified? I mean, this is built into the definition that most people use,
Right.
but it's not actionated. It's not put into action by systems, by professionals doing it. Because if you did it and you followed what most professionals say, is that it's the understanding of last resort, and you shouldn't use it when there's suspicions or credible or proven evidence of child sexual abuse, domestic violence, and even in some literature, the standard for justified or reasonable not wanting to see resistance to contact with the kids is a parent who has a history of just not being engaged. Like, if this, like this, the bar is really low in the literature to say, yeah, of course this kid doesn't want to spend time with this person because this person hasn't paid attention to them. Not that they've been abusive even, but
Right.
what I find is that in most of these systems, that attention to that, the alleged alienated parents parenting, usually a dad, almost always, but not exclusively, isn't looked at in the same scrutiny. And so the issue becomes the
Right.
mother's gatekeeping, the mother's controlling, the mother's giving her unjustified fear, all those things.
Right.
So the book really directly addresses that head on.
Okay, great. What other topics, I guess, will readers find in the book?
Well, one is, again, it's all against this backdrop of how do we tackle and think about equalizing expectations of mothers and fathers. But that's all it is. That's what you said about the men's rights stuff. All I'm
Right.
saying is, fathers, just treat fathers like you treat mothers. Just sort of look
Right.
at their parenting behavior through the same lens, and don't expect women to be these super moms. I had somebody say to me, a social worker once years ago, well, if that was my kid, talking about a mother, I would jump out of a second-story building to save them. Now, maybe you would. And I'm not justifying. I'm not saying I wouldn't do that either. Maybe I would. But to talk to somebody about somebody, like, unless they're willing to put their life in jeopardy, that they're not being protective, is this incredibly unrealistic standard that's there. So the book is kind of premised on sort of, we have to look at it. So, for instance, there's the myth of child witness, which basically says we lose holding perpetrators accountable as parents because we just think the intersection between domestic violence is, did the kids see and hear? And we hamstring professionals who go into homes and go, well, the kid was asleep. We're kind of worried about the kid, but we can't open a case because they didn't see it, or they're too young to interview. And the truth is, if you looked at this family story, this kid's been moved 3 times before the age of 4 because dad's violence caused eviction, lost a job. The mother fled with the kids to shelter, then moved someplace else, and the dad found them, and then dragged them back to where they used to live. And so the kid's been disrupted 6 different ways to Sunday.
Right.
But all we do is professionals go in with a lens and say, oh, did the kids see it? No, they were asleep. So no, we're going to close the case. And we don't dig in. And if we do dig in, the idea of witnessing domestic violence suggests that it was the violence between the two people and mutualizes it, versus naming the person who did the violence and then describing how they harmed the kids through their behaviors. And I feel sometimes embarrassed, Ali, to sort of talk this way, because when you say it to a lay audience, sometimes it's like, that seems super obvious that you should focus on who did what to whom and hold the person who did it responsible. That's all. Like, that's the radical idea behind the book in some ways.
Well, it's just very hard to do when you're dealing with narcissism and someone that believes they can do no wrong.
Well, and what I want to say to you, that shouldn't be the problem of the court, which is
Right.
supposed to, or child protection system, which are supposed to put an objective lens and in fact include the fact that somebody, and in fact, this is very, like, again, I'm most familiar right now because I've been working on material for the Australian court, that you look for somebody's parental capacity as
Right.
part of your decision making. Well, if somebody's done harm and you can see that, and they lack the insight into the harm they've done, and they make everything about themselves or what the other person did to them, right? So you're talking about the narcissistic kind of view.
Right.
Then that should work against them in the decision. So yes, the person who did it may be like, I'm great, I'm wonderful. It's the job of the professional to put all the
Right.
pieces together
And see all the red flags.
and to actually use that should be a mark against this person, especially when it's lined up against their behavior. And so some of the model is so foundational
Teaches that.
about behaviors. Don't look at
That's very important.
employment, don't look at income, don't look
Sure.
at how they present
On paper, someone could look fantastic.
their education. You look at their pattern of behavior, and don't look at
Right.
it through an incident-based lens, but look at it through the pattern of coercive control.
Well, I agree with all of that. Now, where can everyone get your book?
Well, the easiest place, and I know some people may struggle with it, is Amazon right now.
Okay.
But,
Always
it's
a good
available.
one.
Yeah, so it's available on Amazon.com.
Okay.
So it's been there. It's been bestsellers at different times in different categories. We're selling thousands of books. Very excited.
Yeah, and I'm
That's
actually
a big
going to
one.
take a read and see what wisdom you have that I can share with my audience.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I guess just to sort of wrap up, what are some of the biggest challenges or hurdles that you've seen when it comes to child safety?
Well, it's really these things, which is first to get systems to really partner with domestic violence survivors and not blame them for
Right.
what their kids are going through. That's the biggest thing, and the work we do really talks about how systems step by step can partner better, validate survivors' experience, listen, and really collaborate with them around their own safety and the safety of their kids. So
Right.
that's one of the big hurdles. And then the other big hurdle is just having higher behavioral expectations as men as parents. Men deserve that, their partners do, and their kids do that. And that's not
Sure.
about jamming men up. That's about, in many cases, helping them be better dads and the dads that they
Yeah.
want to be and their kids want them to be.
I think a lot of times women get, they're hysterical, they're this, they're that. Like they just don't believe the women
Right.
and therefore take the men's side and they ignore all
Right.
of the red flags.
I think it's just, to me, we can put all the services in place, we can do a lot of things, but for me, if we don't tackle these differing expectations of mothers and fathers, it's kind of a poison throughout our system.
Sure.
That you can create the best response, you can pass the best laws, you can have the best intention judges, and I really mean this. I think a lot of times, and I know some people have really horrible direct experience with the judges, so I don't want to minimize
Yeah.
that. But judges have taught me also to remember that they're not investigators, that they read pieces of paper
Sure.
and they make decisions.
The lawyer, it's their job.
It's the lawyers, it's the evaluators, it's the child protection workers. We deal a lot with evidence in these systems, and if the evidence is poor or non-existent, now in some cases it's there and it's ignored. I don't want to minimize those realities too. But I think, to be honest, that one of the biggest issues is just, if you ask me to train a judge or a report writer, I would train the report writer first, because the quality of the evidence that goes in front of the judge
gives them the tools to make the decision.
That's right. And then it depends on who the judge is.
Right.
If any judge gets bad information, bad evidence, or doesn't get the evidence
Right.
at all, we're really being unfair to them to say, and you should figure this out without the
Right.
evidence. That's
That's
not the
interesting.
system we're
Right.
supposed to have. So I'm very see this as a very systemic issue. There's not problematic people at any level or
Right.
every level, but what we're trying to fix here is that way information moves through the system, the quality of the information. So the lawyer knows, maybe do our mapping tool with the survivor, get the best information from them.
Right.
So so that you can represent her in the strongest way possible. That's what we're doing, and we're doing it over the world every day, which is, to me, is
Well, I am so
exciting.
thankful. I know we had Leah on recently.
Yeah. Leah's amazing.
Yeah, and I know that, a lot of people have asked me about the Safe and Together Institute, so I'm going to put all the contact info in the show notes.
Yeah, our podcast with Partner with a Survivor, is in its 6th season. It's with Ruth Ramonda Mandel. We're business partners. We're life partners.
That's fantastic.
She's a survivor, and so we started by talking about her survivor experience, my professional experience. So we do interviews and episodes like twice a month. So there's the podcast, there's the safeandtogetherinstitute.com website, there's our virtual academy where you can do online learning immediately.
Tutorials. Awesome.
We have conferences. So the book is just, I love the book. That's just one part. I really want people, wherever you're sitting, and we know survivors really love the podcast. So it's easy, it's free.
Put that all in the show notes and make sure.
They should listen to Ali, your podcast and ours. They shouldn't stop listening to yours.
Yeah, no, it's, it just serves as a really good resource for people. I know I get questions every day, so that's why I do this and talk to people like you and get, people some help.
Yeah, that's great.
So I thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I appreciate all the hard work you've done. And
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I can't wait to have you back on, because I'm sure once I read the book, I'm going to have some more questions.
Okay, that's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at Ali@graysonschoice.org.